I'm Chris Terranova, and this is the Generational Exchange. 4 generations, one conversation. The business world is a tapestry woven from different threads: the experience of seasoned veterans, the tech savvy energy of the younger generation, and everything in between. In this podcast, we'll unravel those threads, exploring the unique perspectives from panelists in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s on today's business challenges. By bringing together these unique voices, we hope to spark new ideas, bridge the generation gap, and equip listeners with a well rounded approach to navigating the ever evolving business landscape. All right, guys, welcome to the roundtable, and welcome to everybody listening. I'm your moderator, Chris Terranova, and alongside me, we have a powerhouse panel with over 120 years of business experience across all the generations. I'm going to start with myself. I'm going to be coming in representing the viewpoint of someone in their 50s with over 30 years of business experience. I have a few more miles on my odometer than some of the others. And over my lifetime, I've worn many hats, from building my own business to navigating the corporate landscape. But I found that my sweet spot has really been in customer success and operations, most recently as the president and COO of a staffing company. I have an MBA, and I am a project management professional with a certification. Next up, we have Rhett Suchu, who is representing the ideas of the 30s. Despite being our youngest panelist, he has his MBA as well, and several years already clocked in the world of EdTech leadership. He brings an experience and knowledge both from customer success and operations. He also brings with him an entrepreneurial spirit from being part of several family businesses. Rhett is currently the VP of operations at a medical staffing company. Welcome aboard, Rhett.
Thank you, Chris.
Welcome. All right. Next up, we have Jeremy Davidson, who's representing our 40-somethings. Jeremy has over 15 years of working in implementation, customer success, and project management. And for the last 7, he's been in leadership and senior leadership, developing and leading implementation, customer success, PO management, PMO, and data analytics. There's not much that Jeremy hasn't seen, really, when it comes to business and process. Another one of our group who has his MBA and that PMP certification. Though most of his career has been in EdTech, most recently, Jeremy was the VP of Partner Experience at an insurance brokerage, proving his ability to adapt and excel. Jeremy, welcome to you as well.
Thank you.
Finally, last but certainly not least, we have our esteemed elder statesman, Mark Russell. Mark here makes us youngsters look like rookies. But in all seriousness, with over 40 years of experience in sales, leadership, consulting, his wisdom spans industries, most recently landing him in the EdTech space. Mark is a certified Gallup Clifton Strengths Coach, and a certified facilitator for the 6 types of working genius. Mark is also the founder and principal of the Business Relationship Group, the principal of Business Relationship Group Consulting. You can learn more at partnerwithbrg.com. Mark, welcome to you as well, sir.
Good day, everyone.
All right. So before we get started on the topic today, which is mentoring, I wanted to ask you guys, why did you want to be a part of this podcast? Brett, I might start with you if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to be on the podcast because it combines 2 of the things that I'm most passionate about, that being businesses and starting businesses. I think this is a really interesting idea and concept that can be expanded out into many different avenues, as well as building strong relationships with others, and using that to better create businesses and do other things. So those are my 2 primary reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Jeremy, how about you?
Oh gosh, we've had these mentor-mentee relationships, friendships over the years, and we have these conversations kind of organically. I thought it'd be a really neat perspective to be able to share what these conversations look like and how we benefit from them with other people. I thought it's kind of a unique peek into the mindset and the dynamic of how our conversations work and what we talk about, what we worry about, and how we help each other.
Yeah, 100%. Mark, how about you?
For me, I think at this point in my career, and I'm always still learning from a variety of folks, there's a great line and at the end of the song by Tim McGraw, humble and kind. And in that last line, it says, when you get to where you're going, don't forget to turn back around and help the next one in line. So I have been blessed throughout my career of having many mentors along the way. And this is my opportunity to, share some insights that maybe people haven't thought of yet. And from that perspective, that's what my motivating factor is for being part of this. And I appreciate all of you adding me to this esteemed group.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think that resonates with me. I think, for me, I agree with everything you guys said, and full transparency to our listening audience, we've all known each other for a long time. Mark, you were my mentor, and we're going to get into that a little later on. But you and I have known each other close to 16 years. Jeremy, I think you and I have worked together 12, 13 years, and Rhett, you and I have known each other for 5 years. We've all gotten to know each other, and we talk all the time. We don't all work together currently, and some of us haven't worked together for a while. But for me, talking to you guys about where we are in our careers, it's been like therapy. I always feel better getting off the call. I think we learn from each other, and that's really where kind of the kernel of this podcast came from. Was we were doing this for each other. Maybe we should do it, record it, and we might be able to help other people, because as we looked out there, some of the things that we were talking about or had learned, it wasn't as readily available. So I'm excited to start this. I'm glad you guys are here for the journey. In future episodes, we'll bring in special guest stars, and we're really excited to kind of kick this thing off. But for this episode, this podcast is really about the value of mentorship, right? Rhett, we looked up some definitions and some things like that about being a mentor. Do you mind telling us a little bit like what the definition of a mentor is?
Yeah, according to the Oxford Dictionary, it defines a mentor as an experienced and trusted advisor, which I agree with, but I think there's a lot more to the story there. That's the simple definition, which I'm hoping Jeremy could definitely expand on for us.
Well, we have to, otherwise our accountant becomes the mentor, right? Like you can have that experience in that advisor status, but not necessarily be a mentor. Oh gosh, what were we running through? We were looking at radical candor the other day, and that has a focus on kind of that mentor-mentee relationship, helping to build up confidence and increase folks' problem-solving skills, right? And I could totally see that, because you get into a pickle, you're brainstorming, you're thinking out of the box, you're trying to solve for X, Y, or Z, right? Whatever's going on in your professional world. And depending on the relationship between the mentor mentee, it could even be, stuff that you got going on personally that could very well have an impact on how you're operating professionally. So I like their take on that, and that was probably as a result of one of these conversations. I think, Kristen, you kicked out radical candor to the rest of us as part of a professional development learning opportunity that we had going on.
Yeah, I think we did it as a book club at one point, didn't we? Where we made everybody kind of go through it with us and read different chapters. And then I think, not to dovetail too far, but everybody had to do a presentation on their chapter with a different tool, so you couldn't use PowerPoint more than once, right? Wasn't that? I think that was one of the books we did that on, which was
right.
It's a great way to learn about new tools. I think we learned a couple of new things that way. Mark, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, those definitions are very, I'll say, spot on. But I think it's also important for people to understand, in a mentor-mentee relationship, there is a lot to learn from both people in their conversations. I'm fortunate where over the last 6 years, my alma mater started a mentor program. And so I've worked with a half a dozen, juniors and seniors, and I learned so much from them from that perspective. And even in the business world, it has to be that exchange. It has to be, is there someone that I trust? Is it someone who cares about me? Which is going to lead into our next point. But ultimately, I learn as much from these young adults and soon to be young professionals, because that will help me in my career, allowing them that, I'll say, latitude to learn, grow. There's a great quote that I've used, and all of you have heard of it. but the author John Maxwell will say the problem with experience is we rarely have it until after we need it. So in this mentor-mentee relationship, it's exchanging those ideals on experiences because you want to help that other person maybe not have that lesson learned the hard way. So I think that's, to me, this is the exciting part about this conversation today.
No, I think that's right. I think, one of the things that you have to remember when you're in a mentor relationship is that it's bidirectional, right? It isn't just unilateral where if you're the mentor, you're just teaching. And if you're the mentee, you're just learning it. I have learned that from all of you guys, which is again, literally why I asked you to be a part of this with me was I've learned from all of you. As well as we've helped each other over the years, so I think it's really, I think it's one of the best kind of relationships you can get into. And before we go into the things to look for in a mentor, it doesn't just have to be in business as well, right? For example, I'm going to be going to our Denver rescue mission, and I'm going to be in a mentorship program for people who are going through the life program there, where they're coming out of drug rehab, they've been homeless, and they're looking for mentors to get them started. And I'm excited about that because that's allowing me to be a mentor in a different way. And I'm sure I'm going to learn lots of things in that relationship as well. So it doesn't just have to be in business. Today, we're going to focus on the benefits of being in business, but just keep in mind that a mentor doesn't just have to be a business relationship. It happens all the time. Okay. With that said, to me, and we've talked about this, we've kind of compiled the list. There's lots of things to look for, but we've tried to make a list of maybe the top 6 things to look for in a mentor. Mark, you touched on this when you were talking earlier. I think first and foremost, they have to care, right? You have to care as the mentor. The person being mentored has to care. Maybe starting with you, talk a little bit more about, what you see as care.
So caring really goes beyond the business. In a lot of cases, in my own private consulting business, I do leadership development and coaching and mentoring. And a lot of times a one-on-one between a manager and their teammate or their staff member, it's more tactical. And we get so hung up many times with the tactical, well, let's go through your list of 10 items that you're working on and what's your status. There is a time and place for that. But I recommend for folks that every 4, 5, 6 weeks at the most, have that personal conversation with them. Let them understand that, hey, I want to develop you as a professional. I care about you. I'm willing to put what you need ahead of my own needs. From that perspective. And those with, good managers will do that. Good managers will really look beyond. One thing, and I know we joked about it in our pre-show conversation, was I would always ask the question, how are you doing today? And someone would say, well, I'm doing good. Well, my next question is, what's good about it? Or if someone says, oh, I'm doing okay. Okay. A good okay, a bad okay, tell me more. And when you do that, then people get the idea that you genuinely care. You care about their families. You care about their personal life. You
Right.
can't pry. They have to be able to offer elements, about that. But as you build that trust, then all of a sudden those conversations become really more of a conversation and not just a business discussion.
I think it's a great point. And Rhett, you were on the receiving end of a lot of those questions over the years. How did you prepare for that? Right? Clearly, did that make you feel like you were being cared for? Right? By
Right.
not just letting you just get away with good. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So at the first few times meeting with Mark, I was caught off guard by the question, right? The answer, how you doing? Good. And I'd start talking, well, what's good about it? Like, okay, all right. Well, this is why it's good, I think. And the first few times you struggle with the answer, right? But it did help me for future meetings, not only with Mark, but when I was talking to people on my team later on, right? Think about that question and be able to be prepared going into that meeting with Mark of why are things good today, or what's going wrong today, anything like that Mark was saying, we'll get into later, opens up into that greater conversation of I'm more comfortable telling this person because they're actually asking me why things are good rather than us just going straight to the bullet points.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I know we're not going to all talk on every one of the points, but this one to me is really important. Jeremy, from your perspective, what does that mean to you?
Oh gosh. Well, I like the team's take on it so far. Caring, supportive boss. That's going to be, somebody in a leadership position. That's going to be somebody that's championing your successes behind closed doors, right? Like having those conversations with their leadership, with their leadership's leadership, and shouting your name from the rooftop, right? Because you need a champion behind the scenes that's touting your successes, that's sharing your goodwill. To Mark's point, maybe putting your successes above your own interest, right? It's not my win, it's our win, it's their win. Um, but I think there's a flip side of that too. If you really, especially in a mentor-mentee relationship, if you've got really have somebody that cares about you, they're going to be candid with you. They're going to be transparent with you. And you may not always like that, right? Like, I think there's an element to that. And Chris, we've had that in the past too, where, caring means pushing back and setting somebody straight. Like, hey, you're off track. You're not thinking about this the right way. Have you thought about looking at it through this perspective, right? And providing that almost compassionate pushback, to me that shows that somebody cares, because you can have 15 different people in your life that are giving you the thumbs up and telling you that you're on the right track, and it might be that one person that's pushing you, challenging you, making you think about things a different way, that really cares about how you're doing both professionally and personally. So I think there's a couple different sides to that, but I love it. You can't have that relationship if you don't care about other people, if you're not willing to put yourself in their shoes and support them through the good times and the bad times, right?
Oh, it's a great point. And again, it goes back to what we talked about, it being bidirectional, right? I mean, it is a little bit of a tough love sometimes, but that does show you care. So, as we're moving through these, that's going to be kind of a through line, is you want to find someone, as we talk about all of these different things, their care will come through, and it really does underlay the other points, right? So let's move on to another point. There has to be what we call alignment. And, you want someone who either aligns with your goals or has a career path that you admire, or has experience that you want to learn more from. Rhett, talk about that from your perspective.
Yeah, from the younger perspective, I can tell you getting your kind of first mentor, or any mentor really, as you're going up, can be a terrifying step sometimes. Chris, you and I met in Atlanta, I believe, the first time, and
Yep.
I'd heard all these great stories about incredible Chris and vice president of the branch, and we've grown X amount, and there's hundreds more people on the team. I'm one of those hundreds. And I'd only been on the team for maybe about a year and a half at that point. And I'd been doing great. And Jeremy was actually my boss at the time. But I was looking for another mentor and thought that you could be that. And so when I went up and finally had the courage to kind of introduce myself, I found that we did align on quite a few things. We were both passionate. We were both always trying to help out our teams. You're very passionate about defending and standing up for the people that are on your team, and that's someone that I wanted to be for the teams that I was leading at the time. But the alignment happened more naturally there. But I would say that it's not necessarily that you always have the same exact alignment, but that there's something similar there that kind of drives you.
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, looking at our relationship from the other side, the reason I really wanted to get to know you is you had a different gravitas about you than a lot of the people who were, I think you were 24 or 25 at the time. You were very young, but you didn't come across that way. You took it seriously. Like I think we were at a Dave and Buster's or something when we met, but you came in wearing a sport coat. You had your shoulders back, even though, we've talked about this. I was a little intimidating to you. You still came up to me anyway, right? And that, for when we go back to that caring or that alignment, you also aligned with me, not the other way. Not just it has to be you admire me or admire my goals. I was impressed with you, and, kind of the way you presented yourself. And I saw a lot of me in you. And I thought, man, if I can help somebody who's earlier in their career not fall in the same potholes that I did, because, I didn't have a lot of mentors until I was much older and I met Mark. That to me was really important. Right. Um,
That reminds me
but
what Mark said at the beginning of the conversation was that bidirectional learning.
yeah,
Uh, and one of the cool things that Rhett brought to the table at that time was, uh, at least for me, was providing a perspective on that next generation of folks. Right, had 40, 50 people on the team, and he was representative of that sample size, that generation, right? And what they were looking for in day-to-day work, in culture, in interactions, how they communicate with their team, with their boss. It's slightly different than maybe what yours or what Mark's experience in the workplace was, right? So that was one thing that I always got out of the relationship with Rhett too, is hey, do you know how X is going to be received, or have you thought about the way that we're communicating Y, right? Particularly when it comes to change management. So that bidirectional, you know, doesn't hurt that Rhett looks like he's 40, but yeah.
you'll have to,
Thank you.
if you're just listening to this, make sure to check out the video. Don't leave comments. It might hurt his feelings, but
You'll find a lot of 3v1 sometimes. It's all right, youngsters. Don't worry. We got them.
But you got connected with Chris kind of in a unique way, right? Like Chris always offered out that ability to connect with folks on his team. What was that? What was that process? Was it a skip level process?
skip
Is
level.
that
Yeah, skip level.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if someone opens the door for you and it looks like an interesting fit, walk through it, right? It may not be a perfect fit all the time, but you won't know if you don't do it. And that was something, again, where I put that out in all sincerity, because I had someone do that for me, 15, 16 years ago when I started in ed tech. And I was the only one out of the entire crop of people that started with me that took that VP up on their offer. We ended up becoming not just mentor mentee, but friends. And I learned a lot about the business, which helped me accelerate my career. So if somebody gives you that opportunity, take it.
how many people pick you up on an offer like that?
Say that again.
You offered that out to, what was it at the time, an organization of what, 540 folks or so?
Yeah, it was
How
a
many
lot of people. I had
how many
about a half a dozen. I think about a half a dozen took me up on it on a regular basis.
isn't that
It was if you're willing to spend time with me, I'm going to tell you things that other people won't know, right? So you also got a little bit of inside baseball on what it was like to be a leader in a hyper growth company, right? So there was also some things that you could get a little bit of information about, and you know both you and Rhett got promoted probably faster than others because I knew you personally, right? It wasn't a friendship thing like, oh, I'm going to promote my friends, but I got to know you as people and said, I want these people in higher positions, right? So it also impacts that as well. Okay, let's keep moving. So, because we got a lot to cover here. The next one is challenge and support, right? You want a mentor, and Jeremy, you touched on this earlier, that will push you to grow while offering constructive feedback and celebrating your wins. Mark, I'm going to kind of toss this to you. You did that for me a lot when we first started working together. It wasn't like it was an instant connection. Can you talk a little bit about, challenging and supporting? Because I still look to you for that, 15 years later.
Yeah. So I think again, this is where the trust, comes into play. Is am I asking you to consider some things that maybe you haven't thought of yet? I was very fortunate early in my career, or maybe it was mid-career, that I had a mentor, and she was able to tell me, that good consultants do three things. First off, they'll validate what a company already knows, but they're doing it without a lot of the, I'll say, political baggage or history within the company or what they want to gain from, their own personal gain. So they'll validate the senior leadership what they already know. Secondly, because of a breadth of, conversations and experiences, maybe there are some things that company haven't thought of yet. And then the third thing is they may say something that will resonate with you that maybe Jeremy would have said the same thing, but it just didn't click. And so from that perspective, that's where that challenge and support, that yin and yang comes into play. All right, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but are you considering these multiple options? And again, one of my coaching mantras that I've learned from folks that I consider mentors and as well is it's not for mine to tell, it's for you to discover. And so let me ask you the questions. That way you can say, okay, this is what I feel is best. And even as I've, been a leader of teams and I've been on teams as individual contributors, that's how I always wanted to work with my team, right? I will trust you, but let's make sure that you've thought through these various options. And then whatever you feel is best, I'm here to support you. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's exactly what you did for me. I mean, I remember when we were first starting to work together. You and I knew each other from day one at Pearson, but we started working together a few years later. It was a difficult time at the company, but one of the things that I know you taught me, and it was more of an organic mentorship than more of an explicit one, was you kind of taught me how to slow down and make things a little less emotional. I was very emotional and took things very personally. And, I still kind of read through my emails with your voice saying, take this a little bit slower. We dealt with some very difficult people, both internally and externally in that time. And you just really taught me to kind of walk instead of running to every situation. And that's stuck with me. But in order to get that, you had to be tough with me sometimes. You had to kind of, pull me back a little bit. But it was always with a positive, with love, if I can say that. It was never just kind of attacking me just to be the boss. It never felt that way, which is why I think all these years later we're still friends, right? So I think that's really important. Is that it goes back to what Jeremy, what you said about caring, was that tough love a little bit. Showed me that okay, you did give a damn and you did want me to do better, and I did do better, right? And I wanted to do better for myself, but I also wanted to do better for you. Because I was a reflection of you, because I also worked for you. I wanted to make sure that I did better, right? So it was like a circular ecosystem that fed on itself.
Right. And those were all the lessons that I learned along the way from my mentors,
Sure.
to do that slow down, because I was the same. We were very much the same. If I looked in the mirror, I saw you, 15 years earlier from that perspective. So,
yeah, no, that's something. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Thing, right? Like how many times did you have to have that conversation with me when I was getting upset and amped up and I mean it's a carryover. The budget stuff in particular, it's a carryover. I used to get so passionate and emotional about when it comes time for budgeting and what that means to your team and your resource and your head counts, and are people getting promotions? Are they getting the raises that you think as a leader that you deserve? That was a highly emotional thing the first couple of years that I was dealing with that. And you were that straight face sounding board for me. So sorry, I laughed when you guys got into that, because I'm like, well, this is that multi-generational thing, right? From Mark down to Chris down to me. And I don't know if Red, if you had a similar with any of that, but it just light bulb went off for me.
Yeah. No, it I guess Jeremy, between you and I, a lot of what you brought into mentoring me was your attitude and your approach, which, it sounds like you had support from Chris to be able to come into those big meetings and have that, just smile on your face, but be prepared and had the challenging conversations already. So you were ready to push the team forward in a positive way. Right. And we've all seen that and seen how important it is to kind of be the captain of the ship sometimes. Right. Even if there's a few holes going on, right, you have to be able to keep the team going. And you were always, like Chris and I have talked many times, and it's, if I could come onto a call and laugh like Jeremy, I'm good. We're doing good. We'll get through it. So,
but never confuse Jeremy's affability with weakness, because
no,
that would be a mistake. All right, let's keep moving. Kind of talking about honesty and trust is the next thing, right? And we've touched on that a little bit as we've went, but you want to choose someone you feel comfortable confiding in. and who will respectfully deliver on his feedback. And we talked about that a little bit. Jeremy, when I think about our relationship, I don't think about the budget so much. What I think about, and Rhett, you and I have talked about this too, is I would ask you to build something. And after a certain point, I had to kind of sit you down because you would stay up all night building this incredible spreadsheet. And it did like everything except the one thing that I really needed it to do, but it was amazing, and then it hurt your feelings because you were so passionate about it. And I think I had to have that, that honest feedback with you is like, you're building me a grandfather clock. I need a pocket watch. Like, start there, we'll build it out, right? But you and I had a relationship where we had that trust. It was like a safe bubble where we could transcend our relationship as boss and employee and really have those conversations because we needed to, right? So I don't know if you remember those times, but I remember very specifically having those conversations with you.
Oh yeah, gosh, I've still got my tear soaked. Why didn't he like my spreadsheet? But you've gotta hear that, because that's what helps you grow. Or the times I'd give you a novel summary of what was going on in this department or that department, and say, Jerry, every time you do that, I've got to whittle it down to 3 bullet points so that my boss can whittle it down to 1 bullet point, right? Like it's those type of conversations that if you're open to having them and open to learning from them. I think the best compliment I ever got from you was, you know, uh, it's not that Jeremy doesn't make mistakes; it's that he doesn't do them twice.
Yes.
Uh, so if you're willing to learn from that feedback, whether you like it or not, that's the kind of stuff that's going to help you grow professionally in your career, right? And probably, frankly, personally. Um,
Yeah, no, I think that's right.
And
But
and I was going to say I love this example that you both are raising, because if you think about it, 4 years ago, I was actually in the middle of this. I was in the middle of you, Chris, as the VP, and Jeremy as the director, and hearing Jeremy say, "Oh my goodness." I spent, and he would show me the spreadsheet, and I was just blown away because I can't do pivot tables. I can't, but I was so impressed. But yet, then hearing, okay, how do you scale this back and maybe start with a better, a smaller model that you can expand from? And then at the same time, I'm sharing with Chris, you've got to really embrace and you've got to encourage his passion.
yes,
And his building it all out without stepping on, all the work that he spent until 3 a.m. getting prepared for your 8 o'clock meeting,
right.
from that perspective. So it is kind of doing that balance for everyone. And again, as you're building that relationship, those are things that will start to organically grow. And the 3 bullet points, right? Don't give me the whole book, just give me the first couple of chapters, and from
Right.
there we'll organically grow it from there. So
That's right. Yeah, that's right. I mean, and having been, a coach to both of us, right? You were in a unique perspective, but again, we had that trust where you could be honest, and I could be honest with Jeremy, and Jeremy could be honest with me, and again, the cycle continues. Speaking of kind of moving on to the next point, the next thing you want to look for in a mentor is passion and availability. I think just from listening to this conversation, clearly there is no lack of passion here, right? But you want someone who is really interested in your success, but they also have the time to dedicate to it, right? I mean, there's lots of people who want to be a mentor, but then they don't show up to the meetings. I had an experience with that a couple of times, both on both sides, someone who was mentoring me and someone I was mentoring. And after a while, I kind of had to end the conversation because although I think their heart was in the right place, they didn't make the time for it. And that availability is really important. Rhett, maybe from your perspective, talk a little bit about kind of the passion and the availability, how that impacted you or what you saw.
Right. I think the best example of this is you and I when we first started our skip levels that we were talking about earlier in the conversation, right? It wasn't enough to just have skip level meetings, right? Or it would have been enough, but it wouldn't have had nearly the impact that myself or you wanted from those skip levels with the amount of effort that I would put into like building the agenda for us, right? I was wanting to kind of push the pace and ask you questions and get as much feedback as I could, show you that I was passionate, interested, get feedback on maybe where I'm stumbling and such, even though, that's the interesting part about a skip level is that Jeremy was my boss, but you were willing to give me that insight, an extra level of, okay, that's an interesting point. That's in one part of my 500 person branch. Maybe you could expand that type of thing. Right. But it was me putting in the time beforehand, taking an hour after work to build the agenda for the next day if we were meeting once a month. Yeah. So that was it from my end. But from your end, did that have an impact? What do you think?
No, for sure. I think you raise a good point about the passion just can't be on the side of the mentor, right? As the mentee, for my skip levels, and Jeremy, I see you nodding your head with this. I expected the person who I was mentoring to come in with things they wanted to talk about. Don't leave it to me to share with you. You're meeting with me, have something available. And if you're passionate about it, I'll make myself available to help you. Right. But I also don't want to come up with topics to chat about. Right. That's really over time, as we built our relationship, an agenda was less necessary. You certainly, you and I still do this, right? You still make sure you have a list just so you don't forget as we rabbit hole down other topics. But I think, that goes back to all the things that we've talked about with alignment and caring and everything else, is that bi-directional passion. Jeremy, what do you think?
100%. I mean, how many examples can we find where somebody shows up for a one-on-one or a meeting like that, almost with the expectation that you're gonna run that for them, right? And depending on the newness of the relationship or the size of the organization, um, you may or may not know as a mentor. Your mentor, if it's within your company, they may be your department head, they may be your senior leader, or it could be, depending on the robustness of a mentoring program at a business, it could be somebody in a completely different department that doesn't know you from Adam. Um, and I think the most successful folks in that situation are the ones that kind of come to that relationship and say, "This is who I am. This is what I'd like to get out of this. This is where I'd like to be next year or a year from now. And I think I could really benefit from you. How do I get there? What are some pitfalls around the way? What are some potholes you stepped in that maybe I can avoid stepping in?" Mark did so much uh, back end work and has such a deep expertise in personality traits and ways of working, and motivating factors, right? That can be beneficial to the employee, but can be super beneficial to folks in a leadership position too, in terms of how people work together, understanding where somebody's coming from. And if you don't have that personality assessment or that consultant type role that Mark provided to us, I think it almost becomes incumbent upon the individuals in the relationship to start recognizing those things. What type of personality are you? What motivates you? And if you don't come to those mentor mentee sessions ready and able and willing to kind of talk about some of that stuff, I don't think the mentor is really going to be in a position that they're trying to solicit that out of somebody. Like, hey, don't leave it up to me to define your career path for you.
Right.
Let me know where you want to go, and I am 100% behind supporting you to get there.
Right. No, I think that's right. Okay. The last thing really that we think is in this list of looking for a mentor is looking for somebody who has a growth mindset. And what we mean by that is you want to find someone that is constantly learning themselves. They're constantly on a journey of lifelong development. Mark, you're always sending us new things. You're always, you have a lot of coaching that you do. You do a lot of programs where you're getting certified and learning. Talk about that from your perspective. Like, to me, that's like one of your number one things as my mentor is you've always been growing and learning as a leader. Speak to that from your perspective.
Yeah, so I think the interesting dynamic, and Jeremy kind of raised it, part of my DNA, and, again, no shameless plug here, but on the Gallup Clifton Strengths, they specifically, when all of you received your report, they use a DNA strand as an example to break down what your top talents that when you work on them become your strengths are. And so learner is in my top 5, which means I love learning about the process. I love learning about a variety of different things and staying fresh. And one of the values that, I would always kind of share with folks is I'm going to be a curator of information for you that when it's timely, when you need something, yes, I have a long list of articles and insights that I can share. And again, everything I've learned is from a lot of other people as well, right? It becomes more evolutionary versus revolutionary. So from that perspective, it's just making sure that you're always expanding. And, one of the, I'll say, trends moving now is to say, have mentors in a variety of different industries, right? Don't just pigeonhole in one of just ed tech or higher ed or, technology or finance. But it's when you're melding all those. And that's what I've received so many gifts from, the juniors and seniors from my alma mater, because I've worked with business majors and criminal justice majors, from that perspective. And yeah, you want to try and find some folks that have been there, done that, got the T-shirt, as one of our former colleagues would say. But
You
I
are
think
a
it's
former
just,
colleague who would say,
yeah. But it's just one of those things where as you're always learning and growing, and that's again to my first point is that my mentee mentor relationship, I'm learning just as much from them. And, the value that Rhett brought, 5 years ago is, okay, what are the people that are just new in their careers? What are you thinking about this? How is it going to impact you? And let me be careful. And, and I think the industry learned it a few years ago when they had, quote, the great resignation. I would say it was really the great discontent. The great discontent was, if a 20-something-year-old person was being told, well, our company is like this, and if they're not experiencing it, then they won't think twice about leaving. I mean, all the Harvard Business Review articles will say the same thing, is that the Gen Zs will leave, much sooner, 6 to 9 months, after starting a new job, if it's not meeting their needs. And it's not that, hey, I don't like, getting up in the morning and having to go to work at 8 o'clock and I'd rather start at 10. It's more of a, hey, if our culture was supposed to be this and I'm not experiencing that, I'm going to find something else. Life is too short, from that perspective. So again, I think it's just keeping that growth mindset, no matter how young or old you are, because that's what passionate people want, from the colleagues that they work with.
no, I think that's right. Jeremy, Red, any thoughts on that part of it?
Yeah, I think from the other side, that's what Mark was doing as part of those one-on-ones and mentor-mentee meetings, right? When he's asking me about, okay, why is it good, right? He's also getting a little window into why I may care about something or what impact I think a decision had versus his perspective on it. And to the next level of that, then as someone who is the mentor and talking to your mentee next, you start to think about, okay, well, what impact are the words that I'm saying maybe having, or how does it align with what they're wanting from their careers? And if you're choosing a mentor that you're hopefully aspiring to be or gain skills of theirs, right, and they're growing, then you both tend to grow together. And that gap between you can be an interesting thing, right? I mean, you and I started 5 levels of management apart. And
Right.
as we continued to work together, and if I can be bold, grow together, both in our skill sets and everything, we found that gap got closer and we were talking about different things. So I think all of that is right.
I think it's true. Jay, any thoughts on that?
I like the perspective of different mentors, possibly even in different areas, different expertise that Mark raised, right? Especially from a networking perspective. But I mean, at this point, we talked a lot about the fact that we all used to work together, right? Do any of us work together right now?
Yeah, no.
Mm-mm.
But we've stayed connected, right? And that's super important. And we've got healthcare, ed tech, consulting, fintech, like
Right.
a breadth of information, breadth of wealth across the board, and the people that we've been connected with, that we've had relationships with in the past. Everybody kind of goes different directions, but I think there's really some value there. Number one, you may start that mentor-mentee relationship with somebody that's in a leadership position. Could be your boss, your boss's boss, another leader at your company. But it takes a concerted effort to maintain that when the other person, or both, aren't at that same company anymore. And take 2 seconds and just say, it's worth the effort to keep that over time, whether you're still working together or not. It's just like any relationship. It takes time, it takes effort. But if you're both willing to do it, these will be lifetime relationships for me, that oftentimes involve a mentor, a sounding board, and at this point is also a really solid friendship, right? That I will have for as long as I'm around.
I called you for advice the other day, right? I mean, it has truly become bi-directional. So I think that, if you look at us as examples, we are the embodiment of those 6 things. As we kind of move through this, I think another question is, once you find a mentor, should you have more than one? To Mark's point about having people in different industries, I certainly have more than one. I think all of us here consider each other mentor-mentee, right? So we have more than one. Jeremy, talk a little bit about that. What do you think about that from your perspective?
Oh gosh, I think it's phenomenal. I don't have the same relationship with all of the different folks, but I learn different things from everybody, right? Maybe the most stark difference is I've got you guys, right, professionally, sounding boards. I can run different ideas past you. In a job search, in job search mode, right? Just having that support structure to lean on, the network of people that it's invaluable. In contrast to that, I've got a 72-year-old neighbor that lives up the street, that is the Idaho renowned expert in Nigerian dwarf goats, right?
Naturally.
And as we were getting ready to kid for the first time last year, I've got 3 pregnant goats that are ready to kick out baby goats, which are, by the way, the cutest thing ever. So stay tuned for April, because we will have special guest visitors of baby goats. But the experience and the patience and the calmness and the wisdom that this amazing, wonderful lady that lives down the street from me has, that she's been able to share with me, like, I think that you're always learning, and the more people you've got in your life that you can cultivate that always learning, always growing mindset with, the better off we all are, right?
Yeah, agreed. And Mark, talking about this a little bit, several of us are kind of transitioning into new roles. We're looking for new opportunities. How does a mentor help you in that aspect as you're, trying to expand your network, trying to change direction in your career? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think part of it is what Jeremy brought up earlier about, having that broad network, or, I'll talk in terms of folks about who's your internal board of directors, right? And in so many job opportunities, it really doesn't come down to seeing a job board and, applying out of the blue. You have to know people. People have to be able to help support you, give you some guidance. It really comes down to those personal relationships that really can help propel. And even while you're going through a job search, as you'd mentioned in the beginning of the show, sometimes it does become therapeutic, right? Yeah. It's just a sounding board. It's not like I need someone to complain to, but it's like, okay, am I thinking about this clearly? And Chris, I know you and I, when we were at that one company together, we had a common mentor, and they had a great way of always asking, hey, I have this great idea, now shoot holes in it. Tell me what I'm not thinking about, from that perspective. So I think, again, it's just looking at all these elements melding together, and just being able to say, what can I do next? You got me out of my comfort zone. You got me out of my career to where I tell people I started my second career 4.5 years ago at a request from you to work with your, immediate leadership team. And look how that's now grown, to all the friends that I have, based on those relationships.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think we have covered a ton of ground. This has been really interesting to me. Just to kind of recap on this, if you're looking for a mentor, we kind of came up with a top 6. The first thing is you want to look for someone who cares. You want to make sure they have alignment with your goals or your careers or your aspirations, at least. You want someone who's going to challenge and support you, but there also has to be an honesty and trust so that they can challenge and support you in a caring way. You want them to have passion, and you want to have availability bidirectionally, and you want them to have a growth mindset. I think also it's perfectly okay to have several across careers, across companies, across industries. Find as many people who you can learn and teach as you can, because I think that's really important. Before we wrap it up, any other final thoughts or comments from the panel?
I think from my perspective, Chris, especially speaking to the younger generation and how I mentioned it was intimidating at first, right? And I've had many great mentors at this point, but I think my advice would be to just get started, right? Try to find that first mentor, whoever it is, and maybe use this episode as kind of a guide, right? You may get a mentor who has their first mentee. They may not be experiencing this as well either. So you may have a guide here that you can kind of get both of you started, and they'll still be able to offer you something. So from my perspective, for a lot of people that have maybe never had it and it can be intimidating, I'd say just take that first step.
No, I think that's great. And that'll be fun, right? Especially as you grow. I mean, shoot, you're VP of operations at this. You've led teams up to 25, 30 folks. It'll be fun to kind of watch you cultivate those, right? The next age gap there, right? The 21, 22-year-olds. I think this was a really important first topic for us, because a lot of our future topics, whether it's job searching, whether it's talking about budgeting or leadership issues or employee issues, or I know we've got all these topics that we generally talk about. This is kind of the environment that those topics come up in. And they happen for us organically. We pull up and we meet and we talk about this stuff. But I think this was a great first topic, because this is why we talk about this stuff with each other so openly, is because we've cultivated that relationship over time. So I appreciate you pulling this together, Chris. I think this is phenomenal, and looking forward to the next ones.
Absolutely. Me too. Mark, any thoughts?
No, I'll leave it that Rhett and Jeremy summarized everything perfectly.
Perfect. All right. Okay. Well, I want to thank our panel, Jeremy Davidson, Mark Russell, Rhett Suchu, and myself, Chris Terranova. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Generational Exchange. We hope the conversation between these generations sparked some new ideas and helped you see the business world from fresh perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe for more insightful discussions across the generations. And if you have a burning business question you'd like us to tackle, leave a comment or shoot us an email at cmsrconsulting@gmail.com. Until next week, from all of us here at the Generational Exchange, thanks for listening and happy learning.